A good Tuesday afternoon to everybody as we bring you another edition of the Brandon Warne poorly produced podcast project. Again, I want to thank everybody who listened last night. Set a new record with like 300 or 400 listeners, which is fantastic. I appreciate you all very much. And thank you for listening to this brutal podcast. So thanks again. We discussed Russell Martin and the potential of the Twins going after him, which is basically a 0% chance. But it's kind of a good idea, if you ask me, and feel free to listen back to that. It's just a little further down the page here. I appreciate your time again. Try to keep it to 15 minutes or less. In fact, I have to because that's all YouTube allows, last I checked, for uploads for my kind of an account. So we'll keep it to a minimal amount of time, too, so that I have fresh material as often as possible to keep you engaged and listening, which is, again, what I appreciate a lot. Today's episode is spurred off of a tweet that I got yesterday as I was leaving to come back home, and I didn't really have time to break it down, not only in the Twitter form, which is 140 characters, but just about to jump into a car, meaning I didn't really have time to sit down and answer it. And so I believe it was Jake Allen, one of my Twitter followers, who wanted to know what my thoughts were on Joe Mauer, or more specifically, I believe how he worded it was, "You're no water carrier," he directed towards me. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but he wanted to know what I felt was a valid criticism of Joe Mauer. And again, I realized that I banged the drum for Joe Mauer as a future Hall of Famer, and I still think there's a pretty good chance that that's the case. But there is, I think, a great sense of public hate for Joe Mauer in the sense that everybody thinks he is far less of a great athlete than he is, or a great baseball player. And there's always this overwhelming sense that he needs to change his approach. He needs to change what he does in order to be a better player, which I think is kind of foolish. So as far as criticisms that I would levy against Joe Mauer, almost none of them would come from an on-the-field basis. I sat down with a very respected Twins blogger a couple of months ago at a baseball game, and I'm not going to share their name because I don't think that I really need to, but it's somebody who you've definitely heard of and definitely respect. And we watched this amateur ball game and just kind of had a conversation. We just shared our thoughts about what was going on with the Twins. And in fact, we stopped and got food before the game, so it was kind of spilling over from that, where we had discussed, what do you think about Joe Mauer? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Who's going to make the 40-man roster? All that kind of fun stuff. And this guy and I kind of both agreed on Joe Mauer in at least one way, and it is definitely disappointing how it seems like the injuries that aren't disastrous cost Mauer a lot of time. Now, if Mauer is the kind of player who needs to be at 100% to perform the way he has in his career, which, make no mistake, has been fantastic, then that's something it would be nice if the organization was a little more upfront about. I'm not sure, though, how you do that from a PR standpoint, because you're basically throwing a guy under the bus as soft. And concussion injuries are no joke, obviously. I think that's kind of what we were seeing in the first half, was that Mauer just wasn't all the way back from that. It's not analogous to the Justin Morneau situation in the sense that all concussions are alike. Everybody's going to need X number of days to come back from a certain level or intensity of a concussion. But I think it's probably fair to assume that Mauer wasn't completely right out of the gates, and his play kind of reflected that. Now that's, again, Mauer playing at a below 100% threshold. So kind of trying to give the fans what they want, but at the same time then playing beneath the level of skill that he has kind of set as a baseline. And it seems as though if he ever dips beneath that, for whatever reason, fans are just not happy. And that's just kind of absurd when you consider that he was the best catcher for a very long stretch of time, at least in the American League. Brian McCann was there at that level for a while. Russell Martin was at the beginning, Yadier Molina at the end. But at the same time, it would be pretty hard to make an argument of any catcher overwhelmingly better than Joe Mauer. Buster Posey, again, too, at the end, and now he's probably the best best catcher in the game in that discussion. But when you levy criticisms of Mauer off the field, I think it begins and ends with wanting him to play more often. And it can be frustrating because you're going to get that manly mentality of, well, I played through this when I was this age, or when I played through hangnails. Yeah, that's great. But nothing that really applies to beer league softball or American Legion or town team baseball applies to Major League Baseball in pretty much any form or fashion, and that's kind of the level of expertise that most people come from. And I get that people are being facetious. I get that they're playing a bit as laid forward to them maybe by the sports leader in this town. But at the same time, I think a lot of people are taking those bits and turning them into what they believe to be legitimate criticisms of probably the best Minnesota Twins player in franchise history when all is said and done. When I think about the on-field criticisms that people make of Joe Mauer, those I just don't understand. Because Joe Mauer has honed an approach, and it's only his approach. I haven't seen it on anybody else, where he's basically a disciple to what he believes in, and that is, if the first pitch isn't something he likes, don't swing at it. Now, I think it would surprise a lot of people that Joe Mauer has 126 first pitch hits. He's got 21 doubles, 9 home runs. He's hitting .442 with a 1,046 OPS on first pitches. Now, I know what people are going to say, well, then maybe you should do it more often. Look at how great he is. It's a chicken and egg scenario where if Mauer chases all first pitches, pitchers adjust. If he chases none, pitchers adjust. And it's kind of a cat and mouse game, and I think Mauer has found a nice balance. If, it says 296 plate appearances out of, let me check his career numbers here. He's got about 5,500. So, what does that come up to? About 5% of the time Mauer chases the first pitch. I think that's probably a pretty good balance for a guy like Mauer, who, you break down his splits, hits good with one strike no matter how many balls are in the count. On an 0-1 count, Joe Mauer hits .351 with an .839 OPS. On a 1-1, he jumped to .366 with an .889. 2-1, OPS shoots over 1,000 with almost a .400 batting average. And 3-1, Joe Mauer is hitting .435 with a .721 on base percentage and a .1434 OPS. So we've kind of seen how the count leverage swings in the favor of pitchers, and it was never more evident than Phil Hughes this last season, where he basically pounded the strike zone and pounded the hitters into submission, into doing whatever he wanted them to do with his two-strike offerings. He was number 2 in the league to David Price in the number of 0-2 pitches thrown, which is absurd. Now, we can further contextualize that on Joe Mauer, how he hits after 0-2 counts. .216 with a .518 OPS. That's like Kendry Morales this year. On a 1-2 count, he hits .221 with a .519 OPS. So 0-2, 1-2, basically no difference. 2-2, Mauer jumps up to .270 with a .638 OPS. So it's Mauer protecting the plate. He's got 199 hits on a 2-2 count, but only 56 of them go for extra bases. So you basically see him honing an approach where with 2 strikes he's going to protect. He's not going to get many extra base hits. After 2-2 count, he's got 6 home runs, 44 doubles. So once he works the count back to full, Joe Mauer on a full count has a .504 on base percentage. I mean, that's obscene. A .960 OPS. So the idea that Joe Mauer needs to change his approach to appease fans who don't like his passive approach is borderline hysterical. And people, it's the same concept that I kind of observed on Twitter when people wanted Leslie Frazier fired from the Vikings and for them to hire a more demonstrative, let's just call a spade, an insane coach. Somebody who waves their arms and goes crazy on the sidelines like a Rex Ryan. Or maybe Rex Ryan isn't even like that anymore. I don't know. I don't watch that many Jets games. But for whatever reason, people want more demonstrative. They want a guy they want Oswaldo Arcia instead of Joe Mauer, which Each guy's got their own things that make them great, but let's not try to paint everybody with a broad brush. Think about, and I hate making this equivalence, but when we all play as younger people, do you prefer the teammate who's up in your face after every single mistake, or do you prefer the one who gets it, the one who, when you make a nice play or when you make a lousy play, is going to support you either way? I don't think the crazy teammate, the crazy coach, the crazy anything is really a sustainable approach. And we've seen Rex Ryan's acts wear thin. We've seen a lot of acts like that wear thin when kind of the go-to guys in each league are Bill Belichick, who barely has a pulse, and Joe Madden, who pretty much just an awesome guy. And so we're kind of getting away from what I'm trying to apply here, but I don't think it makes sense for Joe Mauer to wildly change his approach to placate people who haven't really broken down the facts here. Now, let's take this to another level. Move over to Fangraphs page that I have booted up. And when you look at what Mauer has done to the opposite field, everybody gets so upset of him going the other way, going the other way, going the other way. In his career, when Joe Mauer has hit the ball the other way, he's hitting .439 with an 11-12 OPS. 11-12. Let's let that sink in for just a second here. When Joe Mauer hits the ball to center field, he's hitting .378 with an .874 OPS. In other words, that, if I'm not mistaken, is right around his career mark. Yeah, his career mark is .860. So hitting back up the box, Joe Mauer's doing what Joe Mauer does. When Joe Mauer pulls the ball, he's hitting .276 with a .671 OPS. Again, when you look at how players fare to the side they don't go to, which would be the same way as saying Brian Dozier to the push side, you can expect a pretty big drop-off. 671 really isn't that bad. But I want to focus on the opposite. Everybody insists Joe Mauer just drops the ball into left center field. Well, an 11-12 OPS is definitely proving that to not be true. If we break down how his extra base hits have gone to that direction, Joe Mauer has 184 doubles to left field. He has 76 to center, 49 to right. So he's got more doubles to left field than he does to center and right combined. That should tell you something about the authority with which he hits the ball. And I think when I think of the Joe Mauer, if I were to brand one of his hits as the Joe Mauer, it's a rocket shot right over the shortstop's head that runs the gap. And Joe Mauer is standing on second base when the ball comes back in. Joe Mauer to left field, 50 home runs. 29 to center, 50 to left, 30 to right. So he can turn on it, he can burn on it. But again, power to left field. Interestingly enough, as we come down the last home stretch here, Joe Mauer has 7 triples to left field and 3 to right field, but 12 to center field. So Joe Mauer uses the whole field for power. In fact, Joe Mauer, let this be the parting shot. Joe Mauer has 463 career singles to center field. He has more singles to center field than he does to left field, 385, and right field, 252. So you're not going to change Joe Mauer. There's no reason to change Joe Mauer. All fans really have to do at this point is hope that his second half is more indicative of the player he's going to be going forward. Now, I would like to see him possibly try left field. I don't think it's going to happen, but that would allow the Twins to open up first base for Kenny Vargas, open up DH for Josmil Pinto, and move some things around. The Twins have a lot of versatile players, and they have a lot of bats that they need to find spaces for. Vargas, Pinto, you name it. I think that falls into the innovation that I called for at the end of yesterday's podcast. I hope they'll consider it. I hope a new manager will consider asking Joe Mauer to play a different position. Thanks for tuning in on this Tuesday, and we hope I can talk to you again real soon.